So my son, who has Down syndrome, he went to a normal school, and then for about 4 years, yes, and then suddenly we got just one phone call, and they said he couldn't come anymore. He couldn't come to the school anymore. So yes, and that was it. The impact was very much bigger than we ever thought about. It was also excluded from other areas like swimming. But he had to go to the G swimming, which means handicap over here. And even there are differences in swimming. Like all the autistic people, they swim together. All the people with severe mental handicap, they swim together.
hmm Yep. So my name is Stephen Allen. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Mental Disability Advocacy Centre here in Budapest. So we're an international human rights NGO working for the rights of people with mental disabilities around the world. For the last 12 or 13 years, we have been based here in Central Europe, challenging some of the most extensive human rights violations that our target groups experience here. And also in the last few years, we've been expanding this work. So we now work in sub-Saharan Africa as well. We're developing work in India as well. And yeah, and we also operate at the international level around our advocacy work. So our target groups, well, we use the catch-all term people with mental disabilities, but that actually is a wide variety of beneficiaries. It includes people with psychosocial disabilities, which means I'm not sure what the parlance is used over there, but people with mental illnesses or psychiatric diagnoses. We also work for people with intellectual disabilities as well. And also those with developmental disorders, which covers a wide sort of variety of people. So those are our beneficiary groups in the countries that we work in. So this is a very interesting question. I saw this question that you sent through. So I think some governments do provide services for people with mental disabilities. However, they often do this in a way that doesn't respect their human rights. And this is why we exist. So historically, the way to deal with people with, say, mental illness has been to put them into institutions and to leave them there for a very long period of time, and also to deny their legal right to make decisions about their lives. When we talk about children with intellectual disabilities, the response of many states has been to set up special schools for them, for example, so to separate them from the standard population. And as a result, they become segregated in institutions for much of the rest of their lives. So governments do provide services. The problem is that those services often don't respect the human rights of those people, and it denies their right to make choices about their lives. So choices that you and me would take for granted: where we live, whether we get married, how we spend our money, and whether or not we can vote. And so those are some of the issues that we challenge governments to deal with under international law. Yeah. So we're primarily a legal advocacy organisation. That means all of our work is about applying international law, which means the right to inclusive education, as you say, the right to freedom from ill treatment and torture. So that means we do a number of things. One is we identify people in the countries we work in who have experienced violations of those rights, and we litigate them both in domestic courts and then at international courts. So here, for example, in Europe, we take cases, if necessary, to the European Court of Human Rights to get their rights respected. The other side of our work is around advocacy, and what this means is monitoring how governments do or don't respect the rights of people, our beneficiary groups, and then we argue for them to either change their laws or we report on say where they have failed to meet those human rights obligations. We report on those at the United Nations level and call for governments to change their approaches. So, for example, we would do reports around the numbers of people forced to live in institutions in countries here in Central and Eastern Europe, and then we would argue to the government that they should reallocate their resources to community-based services for people with mental disabilities. If they don't do that, we then might also report to various bodies at the United Nations about that and ask for them to recommend change by governments. Good question. I would say one of the biggest issues for people with mental disabilities are that they are invisible in many societies, yeah? So as a result of often being segregated into institutions or separate schools, denied the right to vote, their issues become invisible. So to the public at large, to politicians and decision makers, and even kind of at the social level, people kind of still assume, oh, it's a good thing to care for these people and make decisions for them. And therefore don't actually empower those people to make those decisions themselves. So I would say that's one of the biggest challenges in many countries around the world. And of course, if you're invisible, it's much more likely that you're likely to experience abuse. So people required to live in institutions experience much higher levels of abuse, violence, and torture than other groups in our societies. And because they're invisible, they can't even challenge it often. Which means they can't take their cases to court, they can't get justice. So I would say that's a major challenge.
What is the percentage?
So there is a number of ways that viewers of your documentary can help us. The first and most important one is by getting involved with and understanding the issues that people with mental disabilities face in their day-to-day lives. So the violations I've told you about. So they should come along to our website, read our content, read about the stories of the people we are litigating for. And then we very much need volunteers on board to support us to get the message out. We need people to share, for example, the stories of the people that we are talking about, and also offer their time to volunteer for us in various ways, whether that's holding local group conversations with other students, for example, whether it's doing a film screening, or whether it's running some fundraising for us as well, so that we can actually challenge issues like torture in sub-Saharan Africa. So we would very much welcome a variety of levels of support from your view.